Good afternoon, dear friends. Today we are meeting for the second time because the situation on the front demands it. Sometimes I look at the map and can't understand. Does the Ukrainian armed forces command lack control over the situation, or is it extremely foolish, or perhaps highly cynical? Repeatedly stepping on the same rake over and over again, that too requires a certain skill. What happened? Let me show you everything on the map. West of Kurakhove, the UAF has once again fallen into a fairly large encirclement. How did this happen? And why did it happen? Well, let's open the map and examine the situation. As I've said before, sometimes it feels like the UAF command deliberately leaves its soldiers in encirclements. Don't ask me why they do this, such questions should be directed to Siersky. However, this tendency has become particularly evident recently. For example, near Velyka Novosilka, where several hundred soldiers of the 110th Brigade are unsuccessfully trying to leave the area around the settlement, but can't, as all retreat routes have been cut off. Due to the terrain, they now find themselves on what feels like an isolated island. Look, the road from Novyi Komar is cut off. The road from Shakhtarske has long been cut off. The road from Huliaipol has also been cut off for quite some time. And recently, the last dirt road passing through Vremivka was severed. Beyond that, there are only rivers, and the UAF is stuck on this island. They attempt to cross the river, but about 80% end up as casualties, either killed or wounded. The situation in Velyka Novosilka itself worsens with each passing hour. Reports are already coming in that Russian forces are advancing toward the center of the settlement. The remaining parts of the garrison capable of resisting are retreating westward. However, Velyka Novosilka is not the only example. Remember the encircled Ugledar, where the UAF had to withdraw through a corridor barely a kilometer wide. Recall the cauldron south of Kurakhove, which eventually completely closed. Today we've already talked about Chasiv Yar, but there is another area to discuss. Look here. Do you see this relatively large encirclement spanning about 36 square kilometers? 6 kilometers here and slightly over 6 kilometers here. Even without my commentary, everything is clear at first glance. Let's break it down anyway. The UAF was pushed out of Kurakhove and retreated to Dakhna. However, many, including major Ukrainian public channels, were saying that the UAF needed to leave this pocket. Why? Because Russian forces were advancing not only from east to west, but also from north to south and south to north. Initially, they moved toward Sloviansk and Petropavlivka, then down toward Andriivka. From Shevchenko, Russian forces have already reached Andriivka. Additionally, there was movement from the south toward the north, from Zelenivka toward Ulakli, as well as to Rozliv and Konstantinopil. Even Butusov himself said that the UAF needed to withdraw at least to Bohatyr and Alexeivka and establish a defensive line there. But no, UAF command seems to love encirclements, not to trap others in them, but to fall into them themselves. What happened next? Russian forces made a push from Zelenivka in two directions, and this entire area, covering about 5 square kilometers, came under Russian control. But more importantly, the bottleneck of the cauldron narrowed to 2 kilometers, effectively placing everything here under blockade. The only road, this highway, is now under fire control from both sides. The UAF garrison in Dakhny and further south, numbering about 500 soldiers, has been encircled. How can they escape? Just look, it's impossible. Blockade on all sides. As I mentioned, the only road from Dakhna to Ulakli is under fire control. Physically, the highway hasn't been cut off yet, so they could try to pass. But it's like playing Russian roulette. Will artillery hit you or won't it? Will a drone strike you or won't it? We'll continue monitoring the developments, though the outcome is quite clear: a complete blockade with the final route severed. This is a traditional map overview of the combat situation. Today, the main changes have occurred in the southern Donetsk direction. There are also new geomaterials from the Krasnolimansk direction and slight advances by Russian forces toward Kupiansk, which we will discuss and review in this video. But before we begin, as always, I'd sincerely ask you to subscribe to the channel. Your subscription greatly helps its development. Thank you to everyone who has subscribed. As you know, yesterday, Donald Trump became the President of the United States. He made many loud statements, including one that announced the suspension of US funding for all countries that are not strategic partners of the United States for 90 days. Let's start with the Kursk direction. There haven't been many changes here today, or rather, none at all. In the settlement of Makhnovka, there are reports that Ukrainian forces launched a counterattack and recaptured part of the settlement. However, this information requires confirmation, which is why the map is marked in yellow. It was recently reported that Russian forces had taken control of this settlement. Today, there is information that Ukrainian forces have counterattacked because the settlement is a critical strategic node to prevent Russian forces from advancing southward. If Russian forces maintain control of this settlement, they could approach the southern part of Sudzha. This is why Ukrainian command brought in significant reinforcements, launched a counterattack, and reportedly pushed Russian forces out. Again, this information needs further confirmation, so the map remains marked in yellow. Elsewhere, Russian forces reportedly attempted an attack toward the settlement of Nikolska. However, their armored column was destroyed by Ukrainian forces using FPV drones. Beyond that, the map in this direction remains without significant changes. Across the entire front line, combat clashes continue today. Russian forces are also persisting in their attempts to assault the settlement of Pokrovsk, but have so far been unsuccessful. Kupiansk direction. Here, both the southern and northern areas have seen changes. Let's begin with the northern direction. In the settlement of Dvorichne, Russian forces have expanded their zone of control, enlarging their foothold. They have now taken control of most of the settlement, specifically the entire eastern side along the supply road. This area is marked in red on the map, indicating confirmed Russian control. The actual zone of control may be slightly wider, but the map reflects only verified information. As of today, Dvorichne appears this way. Moving southward, reports suggest that the settlement of Zeleny High has come under Russian control. However, this information also requires confirmation. 2 days ago, Russian forces began advancing from Vishnev toward Zeleny High. On that day, geomaterials confirmed the presence of Russian forward positions, indicating that the area had come under Russian control. Today, reports suggest Zeleny High itself is now controlled by the Russian Federation. We can see that Russian forces are now closer to the settlement of Borova and appear to be advancing toward it. Additionally, Russian forces are working to straighten the front line near Kupiansk. From Kupiansk, they are advancing toward Novosilka, pressuring Ukrainian forces to withdraw from the pocket to avoid encirclement. Elsewhere, the map remains unchanged today. Krasnolimansk direction. There are significant developments in this area today, with many geo-confirmations and new reports. Let's switch to yesterday's map. Yesterday, Ukrainian sources confirmed the loss of the settlement of Terny. Russian sources had already reported on January 14th that the settlement was under Russian control. Yesterday, geomaterials confirmed the presence of Russian forward positions in this area, indicating that Russian forces are now advancing toward the settlement of Yampolivka. This confirms that Terny is indeed under Russian control. Geomaterials from yesterday also showed Russian forward positions attacking toward Kolodiazy and Bilohorivka. Today, additional materials confirmed that this entire area has come under Russian control. Russian forces have now entered Bilohorivka and are advancing toward Kolodiazy. The map today shows that all areas marked in red are under Russian control. Chasiv Yar. In Chasiv Yar, there was also new geo-material from yesterday. It was previously reported that Russian forces were advancing in the northern part of the settlement. Today, reports indicate that the entire northern area has been cleared by Russian forces. Additionally, Russian forces are advancing from the south, gradually encircling Ukrainian troops. After the loss of the refractories plant, which was a key defensive position for Ukrainian forces, their current positions are now concentrated in high-rise buildings in the city center. Instead of launching frontal assaults, Russian forces are flanking these positions, forcing Ukrainian troops to abandon the fortified area to avoid encirclement. The rest of the map looks like this for today. Toretsk. In Toretsk, new geomaterial was received. Yesterday, it was reported that Russian forces entered and took control of part of the Toretsk mine. This is the last defensive line for Ukrainian forces, a fortified area that Russian troops have been assaulting for weeks. Today, additional geomaterial confirmed that Russian forces have taken control of the spoil tip in the northern part of Toretsk. Thus, the map now shows this territory under Russian control, though it requires further confirmation. Once additional materials or confirmations are received, updates will be made to the map. Pokrovsky direction. In the Pokrovsky direction, in the area of Shevchenko, reports indicate that the settlement has come under full Russian control. Today, geomaterial was received from this location showing Russian forward positions that were attacked by Ukrainian forces. The territory marked in red is now under confirmed Russian control, with Shevchenko fully occupied by Russian forces. Additionally, Russian forces have advanced significantly in the settlement of Kotlin. Reports suggest that Kotlin has already come under Russian control, though this information also requires confirmation. The only geomaterial received so far shows Russian forward positions in this area. It's worth noting that Ukrainian forces had a strong defensive position here, with many high-rise buildings. However, Kotlin itself consists mostly of single-story houses. So Russian forces bypassed the residential sector and directly stormed the fortified area. Within 2 days, they captured this stronghold, and the entire settlement is now reportedly under Russian control. Russian forces have also advanced in Udakne, securing positions in the eastern part of the settlement, north of the railway line. Previously, Russian forces operated south of the railway, but they have now entered its northern areas as well. The map reflects this development, though parts of the territory marked in yellow await confirmation. Sloviansk area. No new information has been received from Uspenivka or Nova Yelizavetivka, but there are updates from Slovanka. Russian forces are advancing along a forested area near a supply route leading to Andreevka. This supply route is strategically significant, and Russian forces are aligning their front line with it. Reports from Yasenev indicate that the entire pocket between Yasenev and Slovanka is already under Russian control. Once geomaterial confirms this, changes will be made to the map. Additionally, in Petropavlivka, Russian forward positions have been identified. A small section of the territory has come under Russian control, with adjustments reflected on the map. There are also unverified reports that this pocket has been cleared and is fully under Russian control. Russian forces are advancing along the supply route between Shevchenko and Petropavlivka, seemingly attempting to align the front line for a two-pronged attack on Andreevka. Kurakhove direction. Geomaterial from this area indicates that Russian forces have expanded their zone of control and now have forward positions in the Kurakhove direction. Regarding Dakne, Russian forces reportedly entered the southeastern outskirts, but Ukrainian forces launched a counterattack and pushed them back. No map changes have been made yet, as this information requires confirmation. There are reports of Russian forces using mortars to attack the settlements of Konstantinivka and Ulakli. Recently, it was reported that Russian forces were advancing from the south toward Ulakli to cut off the road to Dakna and encircle Ukrainian forces in this area. However, no confirmation of this has been received so far. The map currently remains unchanged. Velyka Novosilka. No significant changes have been reported here today. The areas marked in red on the map reflect changes over the past 2 days. However, reports indicate that Russian forces have taken control of this section of the battlefield. Geomaterial from this location shows Russian forces attacking Ukrainian positions. Video materials circulating on Telegram channels indicate that Ukrainian forces are abandoning their positions, attempting to escape encirclement by crossing the Mokry Yali River. On this part of the front, Ukrainian soldiers who fled Velyka Novosilka were reportedly destroyed by Russian FPV drones. These materials cannot be published on YouTube, but they are available on various news Telegram channels. Based on this, it can be concluded that Velyka Novosilka is indeed encircled, and it is nearly impossible for Ukrainian forces to escape. Their only options are surrender or destruction. The map for today remains as it is, with these developments reflected.